There's something deeply distasteful when somebody goes to prison at the age of 28, having committed these truly egregious crimes against women, and can come out at the age of 61, a middle-aged man, fit, healthy, with years, decades of life of freedom ahead. There's something that the British people know instinctively isn't right.
Yesterday, many of us were shocked to hear that Colin Pitchfork, the man who raped and killed 2 schoolgirls in the 1980s, will not be on the sex offenders register when he's released from jail.
That comes after the Parole Board rejected a government challenge against its ruling to release Pitchfork, who served 33 years in prison.
Many, including families of Pitchfork's victims, were appalled to discover the murderer would not only be absent from the sex offenders list, but that he would also be able to change his name upon release.
Now, it's worth noting that the government has said Pitchfork will still be required to wear a tag. He will have to live at specific addresses that are known to the authorities, and he will take regular lie detector tests.
With us now to talk about this legal loophole surrounding the Pitchfork case is Conservative MP for South Leicestershire, where the crimes took place, the murders took place, Alberto Costa. Thank you for joining us again on GB News. We're very committed to this story, and we've spoken to you and others many times about it because it is such a high-profile release which you campaigned against. That was not successful. The Justice Secretary tried to intervene to stop his release. It hasn't been successful. Is he under, in your view, enough conditions to make it safe that he is released? Are the terms of his release strict enough?
Well, firstly, Gloria and Liam, thank you for inviting me on to your programme to keep highlighting the decision by the Independent Parole Board to release this double child rapist and brutal murderer, Colin Pitchfork. We must never forget in these discussions that 2 young innocent teenage girls lost their lives, Don Ashworth and Lynda Mann, and the families and friends of those 2 victims were effectively served with a life sentence. And our thoughts must always be to the victims and the victims' family and friends. That said, over the last 5-6 years, I've been campaigning to try and keep Pitchfork in prison. And I'm, like most of your viewers, I'm disappointed in the Parole Board's decision. I respect it, but I'm disappointed in it. And I'm very grateful to the government for exercising the so-called reconsideration mechanism rules. They did apply to the Parole Board to have a look again, but the Parole Board has chosen to reaffirm its decision to release Pitchfork. So in answer to your question, my focus now turns exclusively to what are the strict licence conditions that I've been told will apply to Pitchfork. What I do know is that he will be subject to an exclusion zone around the area where he committed his crimes. I don't know how far that exclusion zone will extend. I don't know if it's 100 metres, 1,000 metres, 10 kilometres. So what I'm now doing is I'm contacting the Parole Board, the probation services and the police services to get specific clarity on what these so-called strict licence conditions are. And once I've got that clarity, I'll be able to answer your question in terms of where I think the risk to the public might be in terms of Pitchfork being released. So that's where my focus now is on eliciting that information from the Parole Board to tell us exactly what are these licence conditions.
Alberto, just reiterating what Gloria said, thanks a lot for coming again on to GB News. We do understand the strength of feeling about this case. I should say that we had Chris Daw QC on yesterday, who wrote the very respected book Justice on Trial, and he marked my card. I know we just said that it was the Parole Board that rejected the Justice Secretary's petition. Technically speaking, Chris Daw informed me it was an independent judge working on behalf of the Parole Board. So just to correct what we just said there. But, you know, you're the local MP. I think it's fair to say people from all sides of the House understand you're a well-respected local MP. I think that's fair to say. Just in your role as a local MP, convey to the country how local people feel about this decision in your experience of talking to them.
Well, firstly, Liam, you're right to say that it was a member of the judiciary that acted on behalf of the Parole Board for the reconsideration mechanism decision. That's why I said I respect the decision. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I certainly respect members of the judiciary, but I disagree, and I'm certainly disappointed in the decision whilst being able to continue to respect it. Insofar as my constituents are concerned, in fact, I think they speak for the whole of our country. There's something deeply distasteful when somebody goes to prison at the age of 28, having committed these truly egregious crimes against women, and can come out at the age of 61, a middle-aged man, fit, healthy, with years, decades of life of freedom ahead. There's something that the British people know instinctively isn't right. Now, I accept parole. I think the parole system is absolutely appropriate. It would be quite wrong for me or any minister to determine who stays in prison. But from time to time, the Parole Board do have to deal with extremely sensitive cases, and this is one of them. And I think the British public are probably right when they say there's something not quite right releasing someone who's 61, having committed those sorts of offences, whether he's been rehabilitated or not. And I think it's appropriate for your viewers to at least ask the question, should we consider locking people up that commit these sorts of crimes for life? And by life, I mean the whole of their natural life, regardless of whether they've been rehabilitated or not. And that's certainly a debate, a discussion that I think is right to have.
Yesterday, the focus turned on the fact that Colin Pitchfork won't be on the sex offenders register and he will be able to change his name. Do either of those things concern you, and if so, why?
So the important thing here is to understand what the strict licence conditions are under which he will be released. Remember, he will be released on licence, so if he breaches any of these licence conditions, he is at risk of being immediately recalled into prison. I want to know what those strict licence conditions are. I know, for example, he will be monitored, but what does that mean? Will he be monitored 24/7, or is it a monitor that only takes a transmission peak once an hour? I've no idea, so I need to know exactly what we mean by the tag that he's been wearing and what resources will be applied to monitor this man's movements. In addition to that, what is the extent of the exclusion zone? As I mentioned earlier, I simply don't know the extent of it. Is it a mile, 10 miles? Is it the whole of Leicestershire? I simply don't know. So before I can answer the question about the sex offenders register of 97, I need to know how strict are these so-called licensing conditions under which you'll be released. And once I've got that detail, I'll be able to then judge whether or not I consider it to be strict enough as opposed to registration on the sex offenders list.
Alberto Costa, thank you so much once again for joining us on GB News. Let's stay in close touch about this story in the run-up to Colin Pitchfork's release. It's very much on your mind, I know, and on the mind of your constituents and indeed a lot of our viewers. Just briefly, do you know when he will be released? Do you have a date even, you've been told?
So again, the Ministry of Justice unfortunately hasn't given me that clarity. From what I understand, from having had discussions with the Chief Executive of the Parole Board, it's usually around 5 or so weeks from when the decision is confirmed. The decision has now been confirmed, so I'm taking it that it will be around mid-August or end of August, thereabout, when this individual will be released. But that's another of these information disclosures that I'm seeking clarity on, and I might raise it with the Prime Minister tomorrow at Prime Minister's Questions.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.